Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9, The Bigger Picture. It silently stalks its victims, and it can happen to anyone at any time. When a brain aneurysm bursts, only one thing is for certain: life will never be the same. Tonight, our Beatrice Politi chronicles one man's story of survival.
Oh, so much for pre-split bagels.
It's the little things that frustrate Mike Langevin.
I actually pierced myself. There we go. Simple things aren't always easy. Or the so-called simple things. Everything's a little more complicated one-handed.
3 years ago, at the age of 43, Mike, a celebrated firefighter, father to 7-year-old Trent, and husband to Janet for 14 years, was just getting home from taking their son to curling. It was April Fool's Day, and Mike was about to face a fight that would pit him against all odds.
Worst headache of my life. It was like a blinding headache.
It was a regular night. Mike had finished a 24-hour shift, and Janet got home from work early. Mike told Janet he had a headache. He took some over-the-counter drugs.
He went to the spare room, closed the blinds, closed the door, and I thought, wow, he must have a doozy.
About 3 hours later,
Trent and I are upstairs watching TV, which is just down from the bedrooms, and we hear this big crash. So we go running. Mike's now in the master bedroom, and there he is hanging onto our headboard. And he's looking at me, and I said, "Sweetie, what's the matter?" And he couldn't say anything. I did scratch his hand, and I said, "Can you feel that?" And he said, "No, I'm going to call 911.
Mike was having a brain aneurysm, where the wall of a vein widens, weakens, and bursts. Mike was on the brink of death. He was rushed to hospital. Dr. Dominic Rosso, who specializes in injuries to the brain, would be his surgeon.
That damage was so massive and so extensive that it produced swelling from the bleed itself. Then that bleeding also traumatizes and damages brain around it.
The swelling wouldn't stop. It was a race against time.
This fella came towards me, and he just kind of shook his head and said, it's not very good. He's not going to make it.
Mike's brain was swelling so much it had nowhere to go, so doctors were forced to remove part of his skull to make room.
The brain actually swelled outside of the coverings of the brain and outside of the confines of the skull because there was so much pressure associated with it.
Doctors were saying that coming in, he had a 10% chance of living, and with every day that we don't stop the bleed, he loses 1%.
If Mike lived, he would have brain damage. No one knew how extensive. Janet had to make a decision.
The doctor said, "What should we do here?" And I went, "I don't know, do your best."
After 5 long days, the swelling retreated enough for doctors to stop the bleed using a technique called coiling, placing a tiny metal coil against the wall of the ruptured vein. It's a highly specialized surgery, but in Mike's case, even more challenging. Mike's chances of survival had dwindled to 5%. He made it, a medical miracle, but he would never be the same. Mike's brain injury means he's trapped in a body that doesn't work.
Mike, with an injury like that, will have difficulty with walking. They'll have what's called a spastic leg, or a leg that's very stiff. Their arm may be completely paralyzed or have partial movement. And all of those things create their own complications with muscle spasm, with pain.
His recovery has been remarkable, but also long, painful, and exhausting. Dr. Nora Cullen supervised Mike's rehabilitation.
He had no use of his left side. He was needing help with all of his basic care needs, like feeding and toileting and dressing.
Intense therapy for hours a day taught Mike the one thing he never imagined he'd have to do: relearn how to walk.
Instead of being wheelchair dependent, he can now walk by himself without a cane or a crutch. He has some use of his left hand.
Intensive physiotherapy several times a week at home helps, but he still has trouble holding a plate or opening a jar. Mike feels as though his body has betrayed him.
Well, sometimes I look down on the left arm, doesn't seem like it's mine. You know, lying there like a wounded wing.
That is just the physical toll. Dr. Robin Green studies traumatic brain injury.
Very commonly, people lose memory functioning, attention. The ability to multitask is a particularly problematic function. People process information a lot more slowly. And mood is affected. People often have shorter fuses.
Since his injury, Mike has struggled with depression.
That's been the main, I think, behavioral or motivational thing. He just gets really blue. and then he can't get the energy up to get up and go.
It's hard for me to stay focused on one thing for a long time. And mental stamina is not there.
Then there's the guilt.
I can't be there for them the way I was. I think they've been ripped off more than I have.
I think we only went to the beach once.
Yeah, we did.
They're memories of a different time, a different life.
We had everything in our pocket, you know? Beautiful home, beautiful son. Mike was everything, and he did everything for us.
When Mike looks in the mirror, he can't believe what he sees.
Sometimes I see a stranger. Definitely not who I want to see, because I'm not the same person.
Janet knows the man she married is still there, his zest for life, his sense of humor. But the hardest part has been the change in their relationship.
I got to the point where I was the caregiver. I wasn't the wife. He wasn't my husband. I was just two individuals getting what they needed to get done that day. So I think this is just our next stage, is to try to get our relationship back.
Mike has been stoic through it all, but admits he also feels cheated.
If there had only been some signs earlier, then maybe it could have been picked up years ago that I did have one sitting there waiting to burst.
The reality is, most aneurysms are diagnosed by chance.
So a patient may have a CAT scan or an MRI usually for workup for something else, a headache, a fall. We don't know as to why aneurysms decide to bleed at one point and not another. There's nothing that a patient does or didn't do that could have prevented it or caused it.
Mike wants to get back to the job he loves so much in some capacity. He wants his independence. He wants to be able to drive again. The experts say Mike's brain injury likely won't improve.
He himself might get a little bit better because he learns how to deal with his disability. We might give him a different medication that makes him function a little bit better. But his brain will not change any further.
But Mike says he's fought the odds before and won.
I keep thinking there's a reason for my second chance, which I have to find and make good on.